And we are now recording. One thing you might consider, and you definitely don't have to do this, is while we're on here, I don't know what might be more beneficial to you, paying complete attention to what I'm saying and what's on the screen, or in some cases, perhaps following along. So do whichever you want. Everybody's different, but we're going to cover. You can see this list of things that we're going to cover. And for some of them, it might help you to kind of like when I give you instructions, for example, on where to find the lab and how to make yourself a copy. It might help you to follow along and try it yourself. But again, that's completely up to you. And that goes for Mary or anybody else who might be watching this video at a later date or time.
I did have a question.
Yeah.
Do you take attendance points for the meetings?
Yes and no. I'll explain it in more detail when everyone else shows up. This is all extra credit this semester. This is the first semester I'm doing this, so I'm going to see how it turns out. Yeah, there are attendance points, but they will be extra credit. And if you look at that little agenda that I typed up, you can see there's a part of that where I'm going to explain how you can get those points. So, great question.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Where are we at here? Welcome. One thing I'll say now, and probably I might repeat it later. Hopefully, I'll remember to repeat it later. But this is why I'm recording. So, Chastity, you'll notice that I had to let you in to this meeting. So, I should remind everybody, um, you need to be logged into your WVSU Google account, because in situations like this, for example, and many other situations, you won't have access to a lot of things unless you are logged into your WVSU Google account. And on top of that, and I'm going to really reiterate this later, you really should be checking your WVSU emails a lot, not just because of my course, but for all courses. So basically, if you're logged into your WVSU email account, you generally should be logged into your WVSU Google account as well. That should take care of it. So again, try to make sure that you're logged into your WVSU Google account. That'll help with these weekly meetings, and it'll also help with some of the other stuff I'm going to show you later, such as the labs. The labs and some of the other videos I've shared are only for people at WVSU, and to prove that you're at WVSU, so to speak, that you need to be logged into your Google account. Your WVSU Google account. And we are recording, but we are still waiting until 10 a.m. before we get officially started. Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you said that about the audio. So, um, let's see. Mary was here first. Can you tell me the last thing you heard? I know that's a lot of pressure, and I apologize if you don't remember. No,
The
thank you,
last,
Dalton.
the
All right.
last,
Sorry, Mary. What was that?
I was gonna say the last thing I heard was just you saying that we were gonna start at 10.
Okay, I apologize so much. All right, really quickly, let's go back here. I apologize. This is the first time I've done this for a 108 class where we had weekly meetings, so I'm still kind of getting used to it. Anyway, yes, we're going to start every week at 10 a.m. Or excuse me, every Tuesday at 10 a.m. These are not mandatory. These are extra credit. I will explain that here in a second. This one, because it's the first one of the semester, will probably be a little bit longer than the rest of them because I'm going to basically explain how the whole semester works. And for the other ones, I'll just basically be saying, okay, here's how you did. Here were some mistakes from the previous module, and here's what you need to worry about for the upcoming module. Now, to find the details about these weekly meetings, you can go up here. When you go to the course, you can just scroll down and you can see that we'll have one for each module, right? So you click on this and you can get the details. These should all be the same for each week. But I guess the point here is, first of all, like I said, you will get extra credit. I know this says 2 points of extra credit, and it will be at least 2 points of extra credit. But if it's all dependent on how long our meeting is. So if we go really long and you watch the whole thing, I feel like you should get more extra credit for that. Once I am done, and this doesn't pertain to any of you who are online right now, but for each module, once we are done and I've recorded it and I've uploaded it to YouTube, I will insert the link here. So again, I know you're all here right now, but in the upcoming weeks, if you can't make a meeting, again, this is where you come. You can find the link, and this is where you can find the video. So let's really quickly talk about how you are going to get your extra credit. There's 3 ways. First of all, throughout the video, I'm going to list random words. I'm going to say, all right, your first word for attendance is, and I'll give it to you. So that's one of the things. When we're done with this meeting, or if you're done watching the video, if you're not watching the live stream, you're going to send me an email and you're going to include all the attendance words. As a matter of fact, once I'm done with number 3, I will give you guys the first attendance word. So if you have something to write with, you might want to get that ready. Number 2, you're going to describe the video or the meeting with at least 2 sentences, something that nobody else would know unless they watched the video. Like for example, for you guys, you could say, first of all, your camera was off, right? Because I'm keeping my camera off today since I'm working from home. You wouldn't know that unless you watched the video or attended the meeting. Second of all, as you guys noticed, as Dalton pointed out, I was muted for the first portion of it. So that's something else you wouldn't know unless you watch it. So again, send those at least 2 sentences that demonstrate you watched it. And then the third thing is just come up with a question right after. And again, you might want to write this down as I'm going through it. But if I write something based off of the information I've told you, even if you think you understood something, just come up with a question and make sure you understood it. Hopefully you do understand everything, and your question will merely be a formality to make sure that you understood it. But yeah, so those are the 3 things I require. Does anybody have any questions about the 3 things that you'll need to email me to get your extra credit points for these meetings? All right, then. In that case, the first word for attendance, and you're going to want to write this down, is extra credit. I guess honestly, it should say attendance phrase instead of attendance words. But anyway, extra credit is the first phrase for attendance. So again, after all, when we're done with this, you're going to do these 3 things, and the first word for attendance is extra credit. All right, let's go back to our agenda here. So you know where to get the details for the weekly meetings. I've explained what they're going to cover. Again, this one's going to be in more depth, but usually we're just going to, like next week, for example, when we start module 2, I'm going to really quickly talk about some common mistakes that you guys made in module 1. And then I'm going to also talk about some common mistakes that other people have made that you need to be aware of moving into module 2. Yeah. So any questions about the weekly meetings in general? All right, really quickly, and again, actually, let me say this too. Some of this stuff I'm going to go through really, really, really quickly because I've been doing this for 16 years And some of the stuff up here is more important than other stuff. And also, I know from doing, and I haven't, sorry, I just said I've been doing this for 16 years. That was inaccurate. I've been doing this since 2016. But anyway, so I've seen some common mistakes. So when I'm going through some of this, again, I'm going to go through the least important stuff or the stuff that's easy to comprehend. And the stuff that his students have historically had a hard time with, I'll probably slow down and talk a little bit more about that. But really quickly, let me show you where to find the syllabus. We'll look it over very quickly. And I'll also remind you that you need to read the syllabus before you start anything else, right? So let's go here to the course. And if you look at the very top, well, once it loads up, it's being very slow. There we go. All right. At the very top of the course here, let's see, we form, page, file. That's my syllabus. Nope, that's it. You can click on it right there and it'll pop up and have the PDF. Now, please excuse me, but again, I'm going to go through this quickly. Your assignment is to read it, but this syllabus is very, very generic. So there's no reason for me to really explain anything in detail. But after you read it, obviously you're going to want to get in touch with me and let me know if you have any questions. First of all, I should have said this when we began, but I'm sure you've all read it before. My name is Vasilios Dianellos. That's a really weird name. I understand. You can call me Vasilios. You can call me V. You can call me Mr. D, Mr. Dianellos. I don't care what you call me as long as it makes sense. And unfortunately, usually it's going to be written communication anyway, so I don't need to know which names to listen for. But yeah, that's my name. My phone number. This is my office phone number. Please call it anytime you need me. You'll see sometimes I'm very busy and I'm slow sometimes to respond to emails because I answer emails in the order in which they were received. And I'm doing a lot of classes, so I get a lot of emails. So when you need me in a hurry, call that number, right? And if it's like, man, he's taking forever to get back to me on this email, call me. That number is also forwarded to my cell phone number. I don't care what time you call me, anytime, any day. I used to be a student. I'd be working at 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes. And if that's you, go for it. Now, I'm probably not going to answer at 3 o'clock in the morning because I'll probably turn my ringer off. But I will not think it's weird that you called me if I get a missed call at 3 in the morning or if I'm awake and I take it, right? I'm here for you 24 hours a day. Well, sort of. I'm open for you 24 hours a day. So any questions about that? All right. Email is pretty simple. I'm going to reiterate this later, but I recommend checking your WVSU email daily. And that's my email address if you need me. This is my office, 131 in Hamlin Hall. I'm in there every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Actually, this needs to be updated. That's pretty much true. Actually, I'll just make that true since it's in there. It's in the syllabus. I guess now I have to stick to it. But yeah, that's when you're guaranteed to find me. And you can also find me online. But again, these are just when you're guaranteed to find me. I can meet you anytime you want, assuming I'm available. But these are just the times when you can stop in person, online, without having to make an appointment, right? Just you can drop in and I'll be there. So any questions about office hours? All right. Another thing I'll say too is probably the best way to meet me for office hours, in my opinion, would be online as opposed to in person, because usually we're going to be doing this right here where I'm sharing a screen, right? It's an online course. So I'm going to either need to see your screen or you're going to need to see my screen. And it's better, in my opinion, to do it online than be sitting at the desk together with us looking over each other's shoulders. Course description, you can read that on your own. Let me know if you have any questions. Objectives, you can read that on your own. Outcomes, read that on your own. Let me know if you have any questions. The textbook is very important. I teach out of the textbook. There is a newer version of it. This is only the second edition, but there's actually a third. And the reason I'm doing this is because you should be able to get it dirt cheap, right? Because it's, first of all, I'm sure there's no new versions. They're all used. And because it's an older edition, it should be very cheap. So please make sure you get the textbook. This is the information you need to get it. I don't care where you get it. You can get it from the bookstore. You can get it from eBay. I have one, I think, in my office. So if anyone needs one in a hurry, you can borrow one from me while you're waiting on yours to come in. Just send me an email and let me know. So are there any questions about the textbook? All right, grade distribution. Again, you need to read this on your own, but I'm going to go through it very quickly. We're here for 8 weeks. There's a discussion for each one of them, and they're all worth 25 points apiece. So that comes out to 200 points, and 200 out of 1,000 That's 2 letter grades, right? So weekly discussions are very important. I do this for a reason. Because first of all, being an online class, we get very little interaction with each other. So weekly discussions are great for that. And also, as you're going to see, some of these weekly discussions are really in depth. So it's really a good time for you to demonstrate that you have actually learned stuff, because the exams, those are just multiple choice exams. You can get lucky on a multiple choice exam. So weekly discussions are very important. And we're actually going to come back to that later. Quizzes, again, you're going to have one once a week. They're only worth 20 points apiece. That's a total of 160. So not quite 2 letter grades, but still pretty important. You're going to have an exam every 2 weeks. They are the first 3, the regular ones, are worth 100 points apiece. I'm going to talk about those a little bit more later, but for now, we'll just talk about the grades. And again, that's 3 letter grades for the first 3 exams. And the comprehensive final exam is going to be worth 140 points. So a little bit more than an entire letter grades. And then finally, every week, you're going to have an online virtual experiment to do. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in depth later. Right now, we're just talking about the points. Those are worth the same as the weekly discussions, so 25 points apiece. So they're worth a total of 200 points, which is, again, 2 letter grades. So any questions about the point values? All right. Oh, I heard a noise. Let me see what that is. If anybody has any questions, if you can, it'd be better to say it as opposed to type it. I heard a noise. I don't know what it was, but everything seems to be fine. Anyway, let's get back to this. So again, here's the range. 900 up is an A, 800 and up, 800 and 900 is a B, so on and so forth. You can read that. Weekly discussions, even though it's in the syllabus, please read this. But I'm actually going to come back to this later in this meeting. But yes, please read that. Same thing here. You can just read the whole thing about the discussions. This rubric is a rubric that I hate to use the word forced, but I've been told I have to present this kind of rubric. But the other rubric that is included on each discussion prompt is more relevant, and I'll discuss that when we get there. But yes, there is this. You can read it. In my opinion, this rubric is a lot more complicated than my version that I'm going to share with you later. So read about all that. Let me know if you have any questions. Yes, and again, I'm going to come back to all this stuff later. Quizzes and tests. I'm going to come back to all that later. But again, we already talked about the point value of each test. I will say this, and I'll probably tell you again later. For the exams, they're supposed to be closed book. So you have you have exactly 50 minutes to answer about 50 multiple choice questions. The multiple choice questions are also worded very strangely to prevent cheating. I can explain that later if you want, but I don't want to waste your time doing that today. So if you want more than 50 minutes, then all we have to do is arrange for a time to meet online like we are right now. And the way I have my microphone on and I'm sharing my screen, you would do the same thing. And you would also have your camera on. If I can see you and see your screen and hear you and know that you're taking a closed book exam, I don't care how long it takes you to take your exam. And then the other thing, again, like I said previously, you're going to have one exam every 2 weeks, and the exam will be open for a week. So for example, we're in module 1 right now, at the end of module 1 / the beginning of module 2. So next Monday, exam 1 will be open, right? So you have between Monday and Sunday to complete it. So any questions about that? All right, quizzes. Really quickly, I just want to tell you again, you have to do them once a week. Quizzes are a lot less formal than exams. You can take them as many times as you want. They are meant to help you study for the exam. So even if you get the full 20 points, but still want to take the quiz as a practice, and let's say you take it the next time and you only get 5 points, your grade's not going to change. Your grade is always the highest grade that you do on the quizzes. So please, there's no reason to not get the full 20 points. Just keep taking the short. They're also very very short. So just take them as many times as you can until you get the full 20 points. And again, they're not timed. Quizzes are open book. You can use the internet, use your notes, whatever. So any questions about quizzes? Due dates. I'm going to come back to this a little bit later too. The official policy, as you can see when you read this, is that technically no late work is accepted. But later in this meeting, I'm going to talk about some exceptions to that. But again, the syllabus says, right, late work is not accepted. So don't think of due dates as when you need to start your stuff. Just think that's when it's too late to turn it in, right? So please don't wait until most things are due on Wednesday or on Sundays. So please don't wait until like Saturday to start working on your stuff and then realize that you need help, which is a good time for me to tell you. I've recently started trying to take weekends off for my family's sake. So a lot of times if you need me during the weekend, and again, call me, email me, do whatever you want, you might not be able to reach me. So at least look at everything before the weekend starts so you can let me know if there's any issues or if you need any help. And again, the official policy is late work will not be accepted. I'm going to give you some exceptions to that rule as we move forward in this meeting. Are there any questions about due dates? Nice and easy. Okay, labs. Please read that. Let me know if you have any questions. Later today, we'll talk specifically about your first lab. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there. And at that point, I'll ask you if you have any questions about labs. But for now, again, just read that when you get a chance and let me know if you have any questions. Course policies, please read all that. Proctor testing, yes, I've already talked about that. This is the course schedule. So if you're ever wondering what's due and when it's due, this is when it is. All right. This is, again, week 1 through 8. Tells you which module, tells you which chapters we're covering, tells you which assignments are due. It's all right there. There's no reason to have any late work because it's all right there, or to have any confusion. Is there any questions about course scheduling? And if you have any questions, let me know, because I know sometimes, at least once a semester, I have one student who's like, "Oh yeah, I'm have to go on a trip on this date. What should I do?" Right? So things like that. If you know something's coming up, just let me know, and we'll worry about due dates. So that's it for the syllabus discussion. Any questions about that? All right. And again, I want to remind you, I'm trying to go through these very quickly because some stuff is more important and historically more complicated for students than others. So I'm rushing through these parts. All right. First announcement details. Let's talk about that. Please, 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 please stay on top of your announcements. I can't express this enough. I don't know how many times in all these semesters that I've been teaching where people are making the same mistakes that I keep putting in the announcements, like, hey, make sure you don't do this, or make sure you do this. And they make the same mistakes. And not only do they make the same mistakes, but then they'll email me and say, hey, why did I get a 0 on this discussion? I'm like, I don't know. Did you read one of the 15,000 announcements that I posted? So yes, please read the announcements. Every time I post an announcement, you should receive an email. So again, keep an eye on your email. That's where you can find it. So really quickly, your first assignment is to read this first announcement. I'm obviously not going to read this whole thing because I do want you to read it yourself. After you read it, let me know if you have any questions. Let's talk about some of this stuff here, though. Again, we are having an online meeting right now. We will do it every week. There's a YouTube playlist. I highly recommend this. So before you do an assignment, go to this playlist. You can use the link right there and look for me giving previous students advice or feedback on their assignments, right? You can see what other students did right and what they did wrong, and you can learn from their mistakes before you even do your own assignments. I will point this out, and this is nowhere written on here, so I guess it's kind of important for this reason. This course is constantly evolving. Every semester I make changes because I listen to your feedback and I look at the mistakes people make and their successes, and I try to adjust the course accordingly. So when you're watching these videos, you might look at for example, lab 2, and like, hey, that looks different than the lab 2 that I'm taking. And that's okay. Don't worry about it. Again, just keep in mind that this is an ever evolving course. Speaking of that word, the next word for attendance is evolution. So that is the second word for attendance, evolution. All right, the next thing, and I'm going to go through this very quickly. I really encourage you to join my Facebook group because there's so much stuff I want to tell you constantly, especially as I'm grading assignments and I see mistakes or I get feedback. I like to immediately let the rest of the class know. So, if you look here, I mean, there's a lot of feedback, but I don't want to send you emails every time I come up with something. It's like, hey, don't forget this, don't forget that. Or, hey, one of your classmates said this or asked that. Here's the answer to it. Right. So The Facebook is going to be filled with a lot of constant information, and that's what Facebook's for, right? So it's not like you have to read anything on Facebook. That's the point. These are things. This is generally stuff that I don't want to overwhelm you with emails. So, any questions about the Facebook thing or the YouTube thing? Okay, really quickly, and you can read this on here, but you can get extra credit if you subscribe to that YouTube playlist. I think right now it's making you subscribe to my whole channel, which I think is ridiculous. I'm trying to figure out how to have it where you can only subscribe to the playlist. If I can figure that out, I'll let you know. But anyway, yeah, read the details, but you can get extra credit for joining the Facebook group or subscribing to the YouTube playlist. And the last thing I'll say about this is, again, thinking about the way I'm using Facebook is to constantly give you information that I don't want to overwhelm you with emails. So if you have another idea of ways I can do that other than Facebook, because I know not everybody uses Facebook, let me know. Again, I don't want to send you emails 5 times a day, but I don't mind posting it to social media 5 times a day. So if you have another idea of ways I can share that information with you, please let me know. Any questions or statements so far? Okay, this is a pretty big one, I think. This is not necessarily new anymore, but I've been doing it for a couple of years. I've been picking up more sections and more students, so I'm busier than I used to be. And also, I've received a lot of feedback from previous students who say I give too much feedback. And I've also seen a lot of students don't even care about getting feedback. So for the most part, I'm only going to give you feedback if you ask for it. All right. So make sure, please, though, I love giving feedback. I prefer it because that's how you learn. I don't like to just say, all right, here's your grade, you're done. I want you to learn from your mistakes. So please, I prefer you to ask for feedback. And I prefer it so much, as a matter of fact, that if you were to meet me online for any given assignment and let me give you feedback on it, you can get up to a 5% boost on that assignment. Sometimes that doesn't count. Like if you get 100% on something, if you did it perfectly, I might not have any feedback to give you, in which case, you wouldn't get a boost. But sometimes, especially with labs, sometimes you might get a perfect score, but you didn't necessarily do it perfectly. And we'll cross that bridge when they get there. But yes, even if you got a perfect score on a lab, for example, we still might be able to meet online and give you some feedback, and then therefore a 5% boost to that assignment. And even though this isn't written, if it's one of those assignments that I don't have a lot of videos for on that YouTube playlist, and you allowed me to record our meeting, then I might give you more than a 5% boost, maybe like 10%, depending on how much I need a video. Anyway, any questions about feedback? Okay, again, I want to reiterate this. Please let me know if you want feedback. Question my grades. Like if you think you're like, hey, why did I miss this point? Let me know. First of all, I make mistakes sometimes, right? So maybe it truly was an accident and you should have gotten more points, or it should have been correct and not incorrect. Or maybe you made a mistake and I can explain why that is the correct answer. Either way, it's a win-win for you. You're either going to get your point back or you're going to learn, right? So please ask me for feedback. And this is a big one, very big, probably the biggest thing. So I'm going to slow down here. For the past couple of years, I don't know how long it's been, but basically once AI started getting really popular, I've become very, very strict about this. I've always been strict for reasons that I'll explain later because I'm not trying to take up all your time today, but I will not grade any discussion post that doesn't include at least one non-textbook source. Whether it's your initial post or reply, you need to have at least one non-textbook source. And again, I'll explain later why. There's a lot of reasons why, but just trust me, this is one that's going to help you. And two, it's because people before you have cheated and they've used AI. You are not allowed to use AI. Before you write any posts, please read this. This tells you how to properly use sources in my course. It's basically APA. It's like an easier version of APA. Yeah, I'm not going to waste your time reading this whole thing, but please do read this, right? You have to have sources. There has to be a working link to your source. It's best if you do it like this, like, you do it in there and you're in text citation is what it's called. Let's see, here's another example. You could do it like here, right? So you are not allowed to kill as many deer as you want in West Virginia, parentheses, WV, DNR, right? I made it very obvious how I use my source. So not only do you have to use sources, but you have to make it obvious how you used your sources. Again, a lot of this has to do with to keep people from using artificial intelligence to write their own, to write their posts, because artificial intelligence is notoriously bad about providing resources. And then here's a little hint too. If for some reason you think you really want to use AI, you need to check every single thing that it wrote for you and check every single source that it gave you to make sure it's correct. Because I almost guarantee you it's not. So it is, I'm telling you, it's right now, it's probably easier for you to write your own discussion post than try to use AI. And again, technically it's against the rules to use AI to write your stuff. So yes, make sure you make it obvious how you used every one of your sources. Every single fact that you write has to have a source. So don't think just because you have one non-textbook source that you're done. If you present a fact, you have to have a source that backs it up. Yeah. And another thing, really quickly, like I said, you need to have it, you need to make it obvious how you used it. Let me see. Is there an example of how not to do it? Yeah. What you don't want to do is just like write something, and then at the end, I'll let you read that on your own. You don't want to write a post and then just put a link at the end, because again, even before AI, students before you would just write something. They would Google something that looked like it had something to do with what they wrote, and they would just include a link at the end. So probably they didn't even use that source. So once again, I'm going to beat a dead horse here. The sources are very important. Make sure you use them. Make sure there's a working link to them. Make sure every fact that's in your post is substantiated with a source. Make sure you make it obvious how you use your sources. And please, please, please read this document before you write any discussion posts. You will get 0 credit if you do not do this properly. So also, by the way, if you ever get a 0 credit for a particular discussion, now you know why. You don't need to email me and say, why did I get 0 credit? That's why. If you get 0 credit for something and it's not that reason, I will give you feedback and say, hey, just so you know, this is why you didn't get why you got 0 credit. So again, no need to waste your time. If you got 0 credit, that's the issue. Anyway, are there any questions about how to properly use sources in my courses? I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but there it is. All right. So that's how to properly use sources. Let me look at something really quickly here. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. So let's move forward then if there's no questions about that. All right, there's some other things I'm going to go through again very quickly. I want you to read all these things, but I'm just going to look at them to see if anything jogs my memory about stuff that's historically hard for other students to understand. So please read this again before you start any assignments. This talks about my how I grade. Basically, I'm very, very picky for 2 reasons, or not 2 reasons necessarily. 2 things to keep in mind when I say I'm very picky in grading. First of all, the points I deduct are very small. Because I'm so picky, I don't want it to be like you can make small mistakes and still get a great grade. So I'm not being picky because I want to hurt your grades. I'm being picky because I want to strive to make you better at working and critically thinking and researching and following directions, things like that. So yes, I am very picky, but the points that you lose generally aren't worth much. And here's the other thing, and this kind of goes against what I said earlier, but now's my time to tell you. If you make a mistake, you can always correct it. So if you lost a point, correct your mistake and you can get your point back in theory. And I'll talk about some exceptions to that rule later. But essentially, the unofficial policy here is none of your grades are set in stone. So do your best. When I say you did something wrong and you lost some points, that doesn't have to be the end of it. You can go back and fix your mistakes. And of course, I'll have more to say about that once you guys actually start doing some assignments and start making some mistakes. Then we can talk about how you can correct those mistakes. Are there any questions about that statement? All right, your grade is your grade. Okay, yeah. So despite everything I said, at the end of the day, or excuse me, at the end of the semester, whatever your grade is, that is your grade, right? So throughout the semester, I'm going to give you all these opportunities to correct your mistakes and turn in late work. Even though officially I don't allow late work, unofficially I will, and I'll talk about that later. So because of that, if you end up if you end the day with 799 points and you need 800 to have a B, then you have a C, right? Because you had all semester to make these corrections. And there is a difference between a C and a B, right? So that's just an example. I will be picky with that only because I'm not picky with other stuff, only because, again, I will allow you to correct your mistakes. I'll allow you to meet me, or I'll reward you for meeting me online to get feedback and get that 5% boost, right? So your grade at the end of the semester is your grade. I will not bump your grade up, no matter how close you are to the next letter grade. Any questions about that? All right, this is a big one too, especially these days. I've been so busy. Again, I do make mistakes. And before I submit my grades, I do double check my grades. But again, I make mistakes. So please, if you see that I make a mistake, or if you think I made a mistake, let me know. It's very easy to do. I wish I could show you how it looks on my end when I grade discussions, for example. It's a little drop down box. And if I click the wrong button the wrong way, then you might get a point too many or a point not enough. So, make sure you let me know if there's any mistakes. I'm going to talk about extra credit later. You can read that if you want. But yeah, there will be a lot of extra credit in this semester. So any questions about grading in general? Moving right along. And again, I'm sorry I'm rushing through this, but I know the important stuff that students generally have hard times with. Please read this document before you do any weekly discussions. I'm not going to cover all of this because I want you to read it. And I've already talked to you about the most important part, which is that you have to include references. That seems to be the biggest issue everybody's ever had in this course. So always include a reference. Come back to that, and it'll show you how to do that. Yeah, I'm not going to read all this. The one thing I will tell you that you can read here, you are required to do a minimum of one initial post and 2 responses. That's the official policy. But starting from last semester, I've decided to change that. I'm going to keep the official policy the same. That way I can fall back on it if I want. But to make things easier for you and me, from now on, you really only need 1 reply. So it used to be that replies are worth 5 points apiece. Your 2 replies are worth 5 points apiece. Now they're going to be worth 10 points apiece. So technically you only have to do 1 reply. That being said, I recommend doing as many replies as you want because you can get more points, right? 25 points is the maximum. And if you want to make sure you get the maximum, my suggestion is to do more than 1 reply. Do more than 2 replies, because let's say you didn't get first full credit on your initial post. Well, if you did 3 or 4 replies, even if you get partial credit on those full those replies, I bet at the end of the day you'll get the full 25 points. So my suggestion is keep going until you hit the full 25 points. Yeah, sorry, one more thing. I will say this too. After you post something, don't just assume you're done. Don't just leave a post and be done with it, right? Go back, see if I left any comments like, hey, good start, but can you please reply to this and address this, right? Because you might not get full credit. And sometimes I'll reply to your post and say, hey, please address this for more points. So please, after you post something, don't think you're done. Go back and take a look. Another thing I'll say, and this goes for almost all assignments, the earlier you do things, the better. First of all, like I said, I try to take the weekends off. So if you're working during the week and you need my help, then I can help you. The other thing is, to be honest with you, sometimes I'm a little bit more lenient with people who've turned things in very early than when they turned it in later. This is for 2 reasons. One, I want to reward you for doing a great, being on top of it and doing things early. And 2, it's to avoid cheating. There's been a lot of times, for example, when someone will turn in a lab really early and maybe they got something wrong, but I didn't necessarily take points away from theirs. And then somebody has copied them and turned the same lab in later in the week. And I did take away points from theirs. So that prevents people from cheating, right? So first of all, don't cheat. But second of all, if you do cheat, don't think that you can get your buddy's assignment and copy it and get the same grade they got. Because as time goes on, I wouldn't say I'm pickier, but I'm just less lenient. So again, the earlier you turn it on, sometimes I or turn it in. Sometimes I'm just extraordinarily lenient. I think that was it for that. One more big thing about the discussions. I regularly get this, and please, please, please hear me out here. People, I'll get an email and say, "Hey, why didn't I get the full 25 points?" Well, it may be that I had 60 submissions over the weekend, and it's only Monday morning, and I still need to grade the rest of your posts. So, for example, here, like let's say I have already graded your initial post and you got the full 15 points, but I still haven't graded your replies. When you go and look at your grade book, it's going to say 15 points out of 25. And you're like, hey, why didn't I get the full points? Well, please go to each one of your individual posts. And you can see right here, it says sum of ratings, and it'll give you your points. So you can see in this example, I have graded this person's post and they got 15 points. You can see here in this example, I haven't graded this person's post yet. It just says sum of ratings and it's blank. So don't look at your grade book and look at the discussion and say, oh my gosh, I only got 15 out of 20. What happened? Go look at each one of your individual posts and see if they've been graded yet. Are there any questions about that? All right. So the next word for attendance will be ratings. And really quickly, to remind you again, I know we just briefly covered that, but please read that entire document before you do any work. So yes, get those discussions done. Do more than the minimum if you want, and get them done early. Any questions about weekly discussions? Okay. Oh yeah, one more thing about weekly discussions, and not just weekly discussions, also labs and things like that. Please, if you want, I know this is an online class, and technically that means you're kind of doing things on your own, but it doesn't have to be that way. In a perfect world, I would meet all of you for lab. There would be a day for lab where we all meet at whatever time and we all go through the lab together. I'm like, all right, here's the first question. This is what it means. This is how you find the answer. That's what I want to do because you will learn more, but it's an online course, so it doesn't work that way. So when you do a lab or when you're writing a discussion, please feel free to come to me online before you turn it in and let me briefly look it over and tell you how you can correct it. It would probably be like a 5-minute meeting and then you can just fix it before you even turn it in. Obviously, that's going to help you. And to be honest with you, it's a little bit selfish on my end because I am very, very busy. And it's a lot quicker for me to just look at something and say, oh, yeah, don't forget to add this, or, oh, don't include that. 5 minutes, probably. I could tell you how to fix it. Now, on the other hand, it takes me a lot longer to grade things when there's a lot of mistakes. So I prefer to help you fix it before you even turn it in than have to give you, grade it and deduct points and do math and possibly lead feedback. So again, that goes for the weekly discussions and it goes for the labs. Any questions about that? All right. So that being said, we can go through this very quickly. Basically, and please read this before you do anything. This is also very much like the last thing we saw. Again, you're going to want to turn these things earlier, the better. What else can I say about that? Yeah, basically all the same stuff. There's going to be some other things I need to tell you about labs, but we'll cover that specifically once I show you some things about your first lab. So yeah, read this and I'll just reiterate, like I already said, do them early. If you made mistakes, I recommend correcting them. Again, I will fix your grades if you made mistakes. And the other thing is, before you ask me about your grade, which I love for you to ask me about your grade, but first make sure I didn't already leave feedback, right? And this document, if you read it, will show you how to see your feedback. And I also made a video you can watch that shows you how to get feedback. So any questions about labs? And again, I'll get more specific when we quickly go over lab 1. All right, we're moving right along. Exams, I don't even think I need to say anything about that. We've already talked about exams. You have one once every 2 weeks. They're worded oddly. If you need help with that, you can meet me online and then we can extend or even eliminate the time limit. So any questions about exams? All right. And I know, again, I'm rushing through this because I don't want to waste a lot of your time. But just because I'm rushing, keep in mind I'm rushing on your behalf. If it was up to me, I would be taking my time and really talking about all these very deeply, but it would just take forever. So please don't feel like because I'm rushing that you can't ask questions, even though I keep saying ask questions. I mean it. If you have questions, ask me. Slow me down if you need to. I'm only rushing on your behalf, not for my behalf. Really quickly, let's talk about extra credit. It's complicated, and in my opinion, you don't even need to worry about how it's complicated. But if you are worried about how it's complicated, let me explain. Usually, extra credit is they just add, a professor will just add the points to however many points you have. But what I do is add points to both ends. So, for example, this entire course is worth 1,000 points. So, what I do, I'm going to accumulate all your extra credit throughout the semester. And at the end, I'm going to add those points to the amount of points you have and the amount of total points possible. And I'll just use this one example and then we'll move forward. So, for example, if you have 900 points and then you did 100 points worth of extra credit, I think the way a lot of professors would do it, that would mean you would have 1,000 points, right? Because 900 plus 100 is 1,000. But I don't do it that way, right? So it's not that you're going to get, if you do 100 points, extra credit points out of 900, then you're going to have 1,000 out of 1,000, right? That would be 100% A. That's not cool. Instead, what will happen is, let's say, again, you got 900 points, but you also had 100 points of extra credit. The way I will do my math is that means you will then have, instead of 1,000 out of 1,000 points, you will have 1,000 out of 1,010. And you can see it barely bumps your grade up, but that's the point. And you can read this document. To me, that's the point of extra credit. It's not meant to be a game changer. It's just meant to boost you up a little bit. And another thing, another reason I'm do this weird math is if you look at this right here, there's constantly ways to get extra credit. Right now, if you're watching this video or if you're in this meeting, this is extra credit, right? So it's very easy for you to get hundreds of points of extra credit. You can watch videos, this meeting, and again, just look at this list and you can click on all these things and do any of these things for extra credit. And then finally, if there's something that's not on this list, like if you have an idea for extra credit, then let me know. I'm like, hey, could I do this for extra credit? Yeah, sure. Who knows? Maybe you've got a family vacation planned to a zoo. And you're like, hey, I'm going to a zoo. That seems to be related to biology. Can I get extra credit for it? And you and I could discuss what you would need to do to get extra credit for that. So, yeah, please do extra credit. It won't be added until the end of the semester. And again, it's not meant to be a game changer. Somewhere on here, I even mentioned no matter how many extra credit points you get, you're never going to jump to letter grades, right? So if you have a C and had 1,000 extra credit points, which, I don't think it would ever get to that many. But anyway, I would never jump you from a C all the way to an A strictly based on extra credit, right? Extra credit will only get you one letter grade, no matter how many points you get. Are there any questions about that? All right. So that's it for extra credit. Late work and corrections, I'm not even going to bring that up because we've already talked about it. Again, officially, the syllabus says I won't take late work. I won't let you make corrections. But unofficially, I'm suggesting that you do it. I think it's a good idea. The only reason that the official policy says no late work, no corrections is because, to be honest with you, I can't have half of the class. Like I can't have half of you waiting until the last weekend of the semester, and then you turn in all this late work and all these corrections. I just literally wouldn't have time to grade it, in which case, I would say, sorry, I'm out of time. And another thing I'll say on that note is, even though I am saying unofficially you can turn in late work and you can make corrections, I have to tell you, once we move past a module, then any late work and any corrections you make will be at the bottom of my priority list. Right. So let's say you made a mistake in the first lab, module 1 lab, and then next week you resubmit it with corrections. I'm not going to grade your resubmission until I've graded everyone else's module 2 lab, right? Anything else that's new, I'm always going to grade that first. So if you have late work or you have corrections, the sooner you get it in, the better. And sometimes I just honestly might not have time to grade your late work or corrections. So please don't rely on that. Just know that I suggest doing it, but don't rely on it. Any questions about that? All right. So again, I know we just covered all this, but please read this entire document before you do any work. So we talked about the first announcements, first discussion. Let's talk about this. Now, from here on out, this is what the most of our weekly meetings are going to be about. So we're done talking about the semester in general. From now on, for the rest of this meeting, we're going to talk about how things normally will be, which is where I discuss your upcoming assignments. So really quickly, let's take a look. If you go to your course, and you can scroll down here to Module 1, and you can see Module 1 discussion. Another thing you can do is open the side tab and go down to Module 1 discussion. So let's talk about this really quickly. And this one's definitely, if you have questions on this, please let me know. Because again, this isn't generic information. This is specific to the assignment that you are about to do. The question that you are answering in this discussion is, should we continue to use coal to produce electricity? That will be an important conversation later in the semester. For now, I just had to pick some question. This question could have been anything. It could have been, should we allow people to hunt deer? Right? I could have come up with any environmental issue and made that question. So don't feel like this is truly about coal. Here's the purpose of this discussion. When you look at your textbooks, there's a list of ethical points of view. So when you answer your question, should we continue to use coal to produce electricity, you're going to be basing your answer off of one of these ethical points of view. And the purpose of this discussion is to demonstrate that you understand these ethical points of view, right? So don't feel like you need to do a great job of like, oh man, I am really pro coal. I really need to make that argument. Or man, I really hate coal. I really need to make that argument. Don't worry about that. That's really unimportant in the grand scheme of this discussion. That just happens to be the question that I chose for us to answer. The big thing here is to demonstrate that you understand these ethical points of view. So really quickly, and you should read this before you answer it because I'm only giving you the cliff notes here. Virtue ethics is based on your intention. So for example, let's say some guy broke into somebody's house with the intention, some old lady's house, and his intention was to steal her pain medication. But when he broke into her house, he found her lying on the floor having a heart attack. And he called 911 and saved her, and he snuck out of there and never got caught. Based on virtue ethics, what that guy did, he did not do the right thing because him being in the house, his intention was to steal from her. So based on virtue ethics, hey, that wasn't good. Consequence-based ethics is based on, well, the consequence, right? So in that, again, using the same scenario, that person may have been doing the right thing or did the right thing. So yes, they had bad intentions, but they didn't actually do a bad thing. They ended up saving the woman's life and didn't steal her pills. So based on consequence-based ethics, that person did the right. You could argue that they did the right thing. Utilitarianism is another type of consequence-based ethics. We're looking at the results of somebody's action, but utilitarianism is specifically what helps the most people, right? So it's not just did it help somebody, it's what helps the most people. And that'll be interesting when you talk about coal, because obviously if you're talking about coal, that's going to help a lot of people economically in West Virginia, right? But if you were to focus on the whole world, then you might have a different answer. And then finally, and this one's very rarely used in these discussions, but duty-based ethics is basically, was it against the law or not? And a great example of this is you could say, based on duty-based ethics, before slavery in the United States was made illegal, slavery was, based on this at that time, was the ethical thing to do because it wasn't against the law. So you can see how you can make some interesting arguments. Whether you're pro-coal or anti-coal, you can argue, you can make your argument based on any of these things. So does anybody have any questions about really what your initial post should be about? Okay. That being said, For your response, and I know it says 2 responses, but again, I've kind of unofficially changed that. You only need 1 response. For your response, you're going to do the same. You're going to argue for or against somebody, but this time you're going to use a different set of ethical points of view. So you're either going to use anthropocentric ethics, biocentric ethics, or ecocentric ethics. And I'll give you a very quick example of that. Anthropocentric ethics means humans are number one, right? As long as it's good for humans, then nothing else matters. Again, using deer hunting as an example, you might say, like, if that was the question instead of coal production, you might, if that was the topic, you might say, all right, hunting deer it's ethical. It's the right thing to do because it feeds humans. It prevents, helps reduce the number of collisions with deer, right? So it benefits humans. Therefore, it's the right thing to do. However, biocentric ethics bases it kind of values all living things. Every living thing is equally important in biocentric ethics. So again, using the same example, one might argue that deer hunting is bad based on biocentric ethics because deer is a living being and it has just as much value as anything else, right? One could make that argument using biocentric ethics. And then finally, ecocentric ethics. Ecocentric ethics doesn't place humans on top, but it also doesn't say that every single creature is equally important. What they're saying is the group of individuals, the group of organisms, that's what's most important. So again, using the same example, some might say, yes, deer hunting is the ethical thing to do because, yeah, sure, it might be bad for the particular deer, but for the whole ecosystem, it might be a good thing. Otherwise, you're going to have an overpopulation of deer, which means some deer are going to starve to death or they might die from diseases that they normally wouldn't have because they're overpopulated, right? So again, when you reply, it's either going to be humans are the most important, every single organism is equally important, or the whole environment is more important. Actually, let me give another good example really quickly before I move forward. This is a big one for me. Cats. Outdoor cats are absolutely horrible for the environment. So again, that's not the discussion of this, or that's not the point of this discussion. We're going to use coal. But if that was the question, then you could say, we should eliminate feral cats. From biocentric ethics, that would be the wrong thing because you can't euthanize an animal because they're all equal. But here you might say, well, by euthanizing feral cats, then we then save native animals, right? So we save songbirds and things like that. Anyway, any questions about your replies? And again, I want to focus on this. The biggest mistakes I see here are people making mistakes between using the wrong set of ethics, right? So make sure your initial reply or your initial post comes here and your response comes from this set. Again, make sure you include references. Again, if you want, meet me online and let me look at your post before you post it. Yeah. And then really quickly, I'll say this too. I mentioned earlier that there's the rubric that I have to give you. And this is, in my opinion, every post has this rubric, some version of this. And this is what I think you should look at. This tells you exactly how you're going to lose points, right? Did you make errors? You're going to lose a point. Were you using emotion rather than logic? And you can click that link if you don't know what I'm talking about. It'll explain it. You'll lose points. Did you answer the question? Should we or should we not use coal in this case? You'll lose 5 points if you didn't answer the question. Did you include an ethical point of view? Like we should definitely use coal, but didn't explain which ethical point of view, you're going to lose 5 points. Make sure you use it from the correct list. Again, your initial post versus your reply. Make sure you define your ethical point of view. So don't just say, yes, I think we should use coal based on utilitarianism. Then go on to say, utilitarianism is, and then give the definition. And then based on that definition, explain why you think we should use coal, using that as an example. And of course, as always, make sure you use references. For your response, same thing. You'll lose points for errors. You'll lose points for using emotion rather than logic. You need to agree or disagree with somebody. So when you write your post, if you don't say I agree or I disagree, you will lose points. Again, tell what your ethical point is, your ethical point of view, and define it. Make sure you're using one from the correct list, right? So again, don't use an initial post ethical point of view for your reply. This one is not necessarily a thing because now I'm saying you only have to do one reply. But if you do more than one reply, try to change it up. If you are pro col in one reply, try to be anti col in the other, right? Just it's good mental exercise. Okay. And then for each of these, every discussion we do in this semester, you can also just write a post that says extra credit, right? So add a discussion topic and write extra credit. And then go on, and I'm not going to waste your time reading this, but you can read. Basically, what I want from you is feedback. So if you have ways that you think I could improve that discussion, then let me know and I'll give you extra credit. The amount of extra credit you get will be based on how good your feedback is. So for example, if you just write back, this one sucked, you're not going to get any points. But if you say, hey, the bad thing about this one was this, then you get some points. But then, like, if you write like a whole new prompt, like your own discussion that I could use in a future semester, you'll get even more points. But read that for details. But that's how that goes. And really quickly, before I take questions for the Module 1 discussion, I'll remind you that your initial post is always due on Wednesday, and your replies are due on Sunday. Are there any questions about this specific discussion, or I guess discussions in general? All right, moving right along. Man, it's already been an hour too. I'm trying to make it quick, guys. But again, I'll remind you, the longer this takes, the more extra credit points you get. Let's really quickly look at the first lab. Now, this is important too, because I have seen a lot of mistakes here. People really keep screwing this up. And I can see why. I can see how it's a little bit confusing. So let me show you. Let's look at this first lab. And you click on this. Now, the lab worksheet, you can see, is not here. What you'll need to do is click on this link, and it'll bring you to the lab worksheet that you need to do. Now, everything I'm about to tell you, at first anyway, is applicable to every single lab that you do this semester. And also, everything I'm about to tell you, at least at first, that's applicable to all these labs, everything I'm telling you, you can find it here. So I'm going to show you how to do this, but if you forget, this link that is at the top of every single lab will tell you how to do what I'm about to tell you how to do. All right, that being said, testing is the next word for attendance. I'll give you a couple seconds to write that down. Testing is the next word for attendance. So, again, this is the master copy. You do not have editing access to this copy. This is my copy, right? I don't want you messing with it. So what you need to do is make yourself a copy. And here's how you do it. Oh, where is it at? Excuse me. Okay, this is good. I'm actually glad I didn't show this. So usually up here, it would say file, but I see now that mine's not showing. So if I go over here on the right-hand side, I can click this button to kind of drop down. Ah, there we go. See, now I can see everything. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to File, make a copy, name it whatever you want. I don't care. I would recommend putting your name, like Joe's copy. Of course, you can, again, name it whatever you want, but Joe's copy of Graphing a Hypothesis Section, whatever. This is very important. You can see here, there's a little thing that says copy comments and suggestions. Please do this. You want to copy the comments and suggestions, and I'm about to show you why here in a second. But if that's an option, make sure you do this because that's going to be very helpful for you. Anyway, once you're done with that, then you just hit make a copy. You know what? I will do it in this case, just so I can show you what it looks like. And then boom, that's your copy, right? You can edit this. This is now your copy to edit. So now let's take a look. You can see here, this is what I meant about the comments. So when you see things, there's like little side comments that'll click on it. Like for example, right here, this is just an example, but this shows you how I calculated the averages, right? So again, make sure you copy the comments. Another thing to note is that sometimes it won't give you the option to comment or to copy the comments. So in that case, when you're working on your document and you're doing your lab, I still would recommend coming back to the master copy and making sure that there aren't any comments that are on the master copy that are not on your copy. Does that make sense to everybody? Does anybody have any questions about that? Again, these comments will be very helpful in helping you do these things. Okay, one thing I want to tell you too, again, once you've made your copy, then you can fill these out, right? So you're going to answer a question here. You're going to put your answer to a question to that question, answer to that question in that box, right? So you're going to answer these things. And one of the reasons I have you do this on Google Documents is for a few reasons. First of all, let's say you start working on this on your computer at home, and then you go to school and you forgot your computer, but you still need to work on it. Well, if you can just go to any computer anywhere in the world, log into your Google account, and you can have access to it. And I'll quickly show you how. Once you've logged into your Google account, whether it be your email or whatever it is, and it's always in the top right is how you would log in, but I'm already logged in. There's these little boxes here. You can click on that. Mine probably looks a little bit different than yours, a different order, but you'll have all these options in some other different order. If you go to your drive, then you can find your copy, right? So no matter what happens to your computer or where you might be, you now can access this and work on it anywhere you want, right? Log onto your computer. You always have an access to your copy of that document. Does anybody have any questions about that? Whoops. Where were we at? Lab 1. Okay. So if there's no questions about oh yeah, sorry, one last thing. Once you've done the lab, and I'll remind you of this here at the bottom, they always say this, save it as a PDF before you upload it. It's right there. It reminds you, but people still fail to do it all the time. Make sure you do it before the due date. But really quickly, let me show you how to do this. So you go to File. Again, once you're done with the lab and you're ready to turn it in, File, Download as a PDF, right? And then once you do that, it'll be saved on your computer, on your device. And then you can go here, and it's going to look different on your end because I'm the professor, you're the student. But if you scroll down here to the bottom, there should be a place where you can submit your file, right? So you will upload your PDF that you just downloaded from your document. Does anybody have any questions about that? All right, please, please, please make sure you save them as a PDF before you upload them. And then once again, this is also a good time to remind you, if you make mistakes, you can correct them, right? So let's, again, assume you're done with this lab. You uploaded the PDF. You missed some things, so now you want to redo it. Obviously, you can't edit a PDF. So instead, what you do is you go to your Google Drive, like I just showed you. You find your original document, and you edit that. Then you download a new PDF, and you upload that. And really quickly, I will point this out too. Where is it at? Yeah, first of all, if you want to see feedback, this video shows you how to see your feedback. I also made a video, like I said, if you make corrections and upload a new document, you need to delete your old document. And if you don't know how to do that, that video shows you how to do that. So any questions about how labs in general will work before we specifically talk about lab 1? And again, I apologize for this being so long, but you're going to get more points. And also, speaking of which, if you're on here, see, I may have lost some people. I don't know. Anyway, if you're on here and like, bro, I got to go, do it. That's okay. You can, if you've got to go, just go, and you can get partial points, or you can just go and then you can watch the video for the rest of the points. It's up to you. But anyway, let's talk about this very quickly. Lab 1, this is it, right? So the question being answered here is, how does temperature affect the respiration rates of fish? So much like Cole was to the discussion, temperature and fish is not important. I just had to come up with some question that you could answer via the scientific process, right? This could have been about anything. This could have been how different light colors affect plant growth. This could be about how different deodorants lead to smelling differently, right? Any question that you could answer scientifically, that's what it's about, right? So it just so happens that this is about fish. So please don't feel like, don't focus on that necessarily. Don't think that the whole fish and respiration thing is important. It's just a way for you to go through the scientific process. Speaking of which, I'm not going to waste your time doing this, but when you read this, it will teach you about the scientific process, right? Basically, what you're going to be doing in these labs, almost always, there are some exceptions, is answering a question using the scientific method. You can read about the difference between an independent and dependent variable. Because we've already been meeting so long, I'm going to brush through this. But this is a good time for me to remind you, for any of these labs, you don't have to do it alone. Like if you want to meet me separately, I will literally read this to you and explain all this to you. But for now, I'm just going to graze past it and let you read it yourself and come to me if you have questions. I will focus on this though, because I've seen a lot of students who have problems understanding this part. So again, in these scientific experiments, you're going to be answering questions, right? So first, before you can answer a question, you're going to have a hypothesis. And a hypothesis is a tentative answer to a question that you can test, right? So I'm going to use this really quick example. Suppose you observe, which is the first step of the scientific process, that the grass grows quicker in areas of your yard where your dog urinates. That's your observation, right? You might start to question if dog urine is beneficial for plants, right? That's the question. Is dog urine good for plants? So then you formulate a hypothesis, which is a tentative answer that you can test, right? So you might say your hypothesis is dog urine is good for plants, right? That's your hypothesis. And here's where it gets tricky for people. Based on your hypothesis, then you can come up with predictions. And predictions are if-then statements that describe how you're going to test your hypothesis. And even though we're not going to do this in any of these experiments, in the real life, you're not just going to test your hypothesis once. You're going to come up with as many different ways to test your hypothesis as possible. So again, let's use this example. Your hypothesis is the dog urine is good for plants. All right, let's think about some ways to test it. If I make my dog urinate in a new spot in the yard and measure the length of the grass once per week, then the grass in that area will start to grow faster than it previously did, right? So that's an if-then statement that's explaining how we're going to test the hypothesis, right? It's telling you the data that we're going to collect, which is measure the length of the grass. It's going to even tell you how often, right? Once per week, right? It's explaining how you're going to test the hypothesis. So that's one way to test your hypothesis. Again, based on the same hypothesis, you could test it a different way, which means a different prediction. If I make my dog stop urinating in the usual area, and again, take the measurements once a week, then the grass will stop growing, right? So again, it sounds similar, but we're doing different things. Here, we're looking at the dog urinating in a new spot and taking the measurements there. Here, again, they're still measuring, urinating in a different spot, but now we're measuring where the dog is no longer urinating and see if they're not growing as well as they used to. And then prediction 3, and this one's even better. If I grow 30 plants in pots, giving 10 plants pure water, 10 plants half water, half urine, and 10 plants pure urine, and measure their height once a week, then the plants receiving pure water will have grown the least, followed by the plants receiving half water, half urine, followed by the plants receiving pure urine. So again, these are 3 different ways I could test that one hypothesis. So please, and that people really mess this up so much. In every single one of these labs, I think, there's going to ask for your hypothesis. So a hypothesis, again, is just a tentative answer to a question, right? It's something you can test. A hypothesis is not an if-then statement. A prediction is an if-then statement. And yes, sometimes in the labs, it will ask you to write a prediction. So remember, your prediction is an if-then statement that describes how you're going to test your hypothesis. Any questions about that? All right. So then once you get to this point in the lab, that's kind of like the introduction. Now you're finally getting into it. Now you're going to see, all right, observation. As you probably know, there's different species of fish that live in different areas of the world. So they have different temperature ranges of the water. That's the observation, right? So the question then is, will temperature affect the respiration rate of goldfish, right? And then when you come down here, you're going to answer that. Then you have 3 choices. As the temperature increases, so will the respiration. As the temperature increases, the respiration will do the opposite and go down, or it will not make a difference. So you choose one of those 3. Then you come down here, and this is kind of like more of a formality to help your brain get used to this whole relationship between a hypothesis and a prediction. Then you're just going to choose the prediction that goes along with your hypothesis, right? So if you choose A for your hypothesis, then you need to choose A for your prediction. It's just that simple, right? And again, the prediction is an if-then statement that describes how you're going to test your hypothesis. So in this case, if we put goldfish in bowls, which you will do virtually, and increase the temperature, I should put change. And change the temperature, which you're going to do virtually, and count the number of breaths they take, which you're going to do virtually, then we will find that the respiration will increase, right? So we're saying if the temperature increases, then so will the respiration, or vice versa, or there will be no change. So again, your prediction needs to match your hypothesis. Any questions about how you're going to answer these two questions? All right. Please read through this. Again, I don't want to waste your time since this first meeting of the semester is so long, but basically after you read this, you're going to use this website to do your experiment. All the information you need is here. Excuse me, I'll go away. You can see here, we got where is it at? Anyway, yes, read through this. It teaches you how to do it. Then you're going to go to the next page, right? Good grief with all these pop-ups. And I'm not going to do this whole thing for you, but you can see here, right? This tells you the temperature, right? And we're going to do it in Celsius. So I would call that 10, 11, 12. At 12 degrees Celsius, that's what we're looking at, right? And then you go down here and you can see this is moving. So you're going to count how many times the fish breathes in 30 seconds. And also I want to point out, even though there's this little thing right here, you can also use your own clock if you want. But anyway, for 30 seconds, count how many breaths it takes. Then when you're done, you do it again, but this time at 5 degrees Celsius. Again, 30 seconds, you count the breath. Then you do it again. And here we go. You're going to have 25 degrees Celsius, about that. And again, for 30 seconds, you count the number of breaths. Then you do it one more time. Here we're like close to 30 degrees Celsius. Once again, for 30 seconds, you count the number of breaths it takes. And then finally, at the end, you'll get here. And I'm going to point this out again later. But once you get to this page, I need you to use your camera, use your phone, whatever, and take a picture of your screen. And that'd be better than a screenshot, but I guess a screenshot will do if you want. I need this picture because this proves to me that you did the whole experiment. Another thing to point out too is this information is information you need, right? So you did your experiment, and these two guys here, these two kids did the same experiment, and this is their data. So now going back here, when you do your experiment, again, like I said, you're going to write down your temperature. And I think we started low and went up, right? Anyway, write down the temperature, write down the number of breaths. This is all the stuff I just showed you. Write down the temperature, write down the number of breaths, so on and so forth. And then like I just showed you at the end, there's that table that shows you those other two, what their data is. You will put their data right here. You can see here that I've already provided other data for you, right? Some other people already did the experiment, and I've already included the data for you, so you don't need to do that. Then once you have all the data, you're going to take an average. And again, I have an example here that shows you how to take an average, but basically you're going to add this plus this plus this plus this plus this, and you're going to divide it by 5, right? Because you have 5 fish, so you add it all up, divide it by 5. That's your average. The most common mistake I see here is that people, for some reason, also include this number. So remember, and that's the temperature. So, right? So when you're taking your average, add up these numbers, right? Not your temperature. Add up these numbers and divide it by 5. And here's a little hint for you. I'm not that picky. I just said earlier that I was. In this particular case, I'm not that picky. I use something I call Lookology. So I don't have time to get a calculator out and check every single one of your calculations for every single one of my students. What I will do, though, is look at your data. So let's say, for example, that we only have this data right here, right? Let's pretend like we're only dealing with these 3 fish and we didn't deal with the other ones. If someone here wrote that their average is, 39, I would know that's wrong. Can anybody, for a little bit of extra credit, tell me why I would know that 39 is incorrect without taking out a calculator? How do I know that's incorrect? Nobody? Not even for extra credit? Don't overthink it. Everybody's still here. I like that. I like that you said that. Kind of on the right track. You said it's only 30 seconds. Here's the issue with that one. Here's why I would know that, because the lowest number you have is a 40 and the highest number you have is a 46. So your average can't be lower than your lowest number and it can't be higher than your highest number, right? So again, I'm probably not going to calculate everything. Now, don't get me wrong. If I notice you as a student are prone to mistakes, or I suspect that you're cheating or something like that, then I might actually take out a calculator and do it. But that's what I'm looking for, right? Use common sense after you've done your math. Use common sense and look and say, hey, does this number even make sense? And that doesn't go for just this lab, but for all the labs. And for the person who attempted a guess, when you send me an email with all your extra credit words or attendance words, you feel free to include the fact that you also attempted an answer. So I give you a little bit more extra credit. Anyway, that's what you're going to do. Then you're going to make a graph. And once again, I've already kept you on here for so long, so I'm not going to do this. But if you want me to, email me, and then you and I can meet later, and I can show you how to make a graph, right? This shows you how to make a graph. I have all kinds of instructions on how to make a graph. The one thing I will point out, because one of your classmates from the last semester pointed this out, don't worry about the nomenclature. For example, I say make a bar graph because that's what I call it. But if you look here, for example, let me say I wanted to put in a bar graph right here. Insert chart. For some reason, they call a bar chart this thing that has sideways bars. So technically, I guess I should update this right now. Technically, according to Google, what I'm asking for is a column graph. So actually, I'll just change that right now. But anyway, if you ever have any issues with that, ask me, right? Don't make any assumptions. And I will say this as a hint, and again, I'll meet you later if you want, but for every graph you have to make this semester, the bars, if it's a bar graph, should always go up and down, never side to side. Your x-axis, which is the horizontal one, the one that goes side to side, will always be your independent variable. Your y-axis, which goes upside down, up and down, will be your dependent variable. In this particular case, when you make your bar graph, you're going to have 5 bars. You're going to have one that shows the average number of breaths at this temperature, a bar that shows the average number of breaths at this temperature, a bar that shows the average number of breaths at this temperature, so on and so forth, right? So for every temperature, you're going to have a bar that shows the average number of breaths. It's that simple. Again, I have a lot more things I would love to say about graphing, but I've already taken up enough of your time. So if you want to meet me separately, we can talk about all these things, but all the directions on how to do it can be found in this lab. And then finally, I'll mention this. You can do these graphs using a computer program, or you can do it by hand. I don't care how you do it. If you do it by hand, just take a picture of it and insert that picture right here. Any questions on the graph? Okay. And then one last thing to say about the graphing. Your graph should include enough information where somebody could read your graph without seeing the rest of the lab and understand what all the information means, right? So for example, for your graph title, it shouldn't say lab 1, right? Your graph title should describe the data in your graph. Any questions about that? Okay, like I said previously, when you're done with this experiment and you get to this last page, I need you to take a picture of your device. A screenshot will suffice, but I prefer an actual picture because it'll show your date and I'll be able to tell it's your device and not just some screenshot that your buddy shared with you. And then you're going to insert it here. Don't know how to insert a picture? Well, I'll show you. First of all, you go to insert, go to image, and you're going to upload it from your computer. Or any of these other ways, and I can show you how to do that if you want, but to me, that's the easiest way. If you forget what I just told you, well, first of all, it's being recorded, so you can go back to this video once it happens, or you can watch that little video where I show you how to insert a picture. Yeah, so any questions about that question? All right. Some common mistakes here. What was your hypothesis at the beginning of the lab, and was it correct or incorrect? Did the respiration rate increase, decrease, or stay the same as the water temperature? This is a 3-part question. You won't get any points for the question if you leave any of it out. Yes, it's repetitive. I'm asking you for your hypothesis again, even though you already answered it up there, and I can scroll up to it if I want. But read this, and it'll explain why it's repetitive. So yes, restate your hypothesis, Tell me if it was correct or not. And then again, being repetitive, even though I can see your graph and I can see your data, I want you to tell me, what did the respiration rate do as the temperature increased? So yes, it's repetitive, but make sure you get all three parts of that question. All right, does anybody have any questions about number 15? All right, this one's really simple too. Look at your data compared to the other data. Was it similar or not? Like, you'll notice if it's really off, you'll know. You won't lose points for it. Just let me know, because that's another thing that you need to do. Even as I would assume none of you are biologists, but even as non-biologists later in your life, hopefully when people present you with data, you don't just believe it, you second guess it. And then you should look at all the data and look for red flags. So in this case, you're looking for your own red flags, right? Was your data a lot different than the other data? That's something you should recognize. Even though you won't lose points for your data being different, you should at least recognize it. Any questions about number 16? All right. Other than doing this experiment in real life, how can this experiment be improved? All right. So you're going to get this question a lot. Some version of this question almost on every lab you do this semester. And again, this is something you should look for, even as non-biology majors. If someone presents you with data in the real world, it says, hey, I know you want to vote for this candidate, but you know they support this policy, and here's some data that shows how bad this policy is. Look at the data. Look at the experiments they did to get that data, right? And if you're looking at experiments, you need to recognize some of the flaws in the experiment. So make sure that's basically what all these, again, this common question that you're going to get. What are some ways that you could improve this experiment? What are some flaws in the experiment? And really quickly, I'll just give you one. You're going to have to come up with other ones. If you look, it's not showing it. But remember, it just showed you that thing just flapping its mouth, right? It just showed you the fish flapping its mouth. And hey, that's kind of hard to count. And you could put that as one of the flaws. It was just hard to count the number of breaths. So yes, think about the way that the experiment could be improved. Why do we take an average? You just look that up. I don't want to waste any more of your time talking about that. Make sure when you look it up, again, this is a two-part question, include the link to your source. So whatever information you include the link. Do you think these results can be applied to all goldfish or just the ones in your experiment? Again, I want you to think that through and give me an answer. And usually you won't lose questions or lose points for that. It's hard to mess that one up, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there if you happen to get it wrong. Same thing with this. Do you think these results can apply to all fish, not just goldfish, but all fish? And again, for these two questions, assume that you did a real experiment and it wasn't virtual, because the quick answer to both of those questions is no, because it was a virtual experiment, so it's not real. But pretend like it was real. Really quickly, again, you're going to get these kind of questions a lot in this semester. You collect data in these experiments, and there's sometimes different ways to collect the data. So, for example, in this experiment, the data you collect is the average number of breaths, and the way you did it was counting the number of times that fish moved its mouth. So then the question is, all right, how else could you measure the respiration rate? And you can read about this and give you some hints, but I'll leave it at that. Again, if you need help, we can meet separately and I can help you through that. Now, I just wanted to make sure you understand the relationship between a hypothesis and a prediction. So now once you get to question 22, we're just kind of putting the experiment that you just did behind us. And you're going to look at a different question. Does the respiration rate of goldfish increase as they are exposed to increasingly now louder noises? So write a hypothesis for that. And then based on your hypothesis, write a prediction. And as these questions remind you to do, you can just go look back at the predictions and hypotheses that you already wrote as a guide to what to write here. And again, it's a hypothesis. So as long as you write it in the correct form, you're okay. You're not going to lose points. Same here. It's just a prediction. You just write, as long as you wrote it in the correct format, then you're not going to lose points. Which, sorry about this, really quickly reminds me to tell you on this first question here, not the first question, was your hypothesis correct, right? I want to tell you right now, you will never lose points for having an incorrect hypothesis, right? It was just a guess, and then you tested it and it turned out to be wrong. You will never lose points for that. The only way you'll ever lose points is if, for example, your hypothesis was correct, but you misinterpreted the data. And then in this question, you wrote that your hypothesis was incorrect, right? If it was correct, you need to recognize that it was correct. If it was incorrect, you need to recognize that it was incorrect. That's the only way you'll lose points for that. You will never lose points because your hypothesis was incorrect. So any questions about 22 or 23? I'm excited. We're almost done. I feel bad for keeping you guys on this long. So again, at the end, I'm reminding you to save your file as a PDF before you upload it. If you forget how to do that, click on that link. It shows you how to do it. Put your name there. Make sure you do it on time. I don't know how many times people to screw this up. It says it right there. Save it as a PDF, and people fail to do that. So if you need help, do it. Let me know if you need help. That'll be very important later in the semester. So you'll always lose points for it if you don't do it. But later in the semester, if you don't save it as a PDF, there's a lot of formatting issues and you'll lose a lot of points. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. And then really quickly, labs are worth 25 points. So if you get the full 25 points, that's it. Even if you do extra credit down here, you still will only get 25 points. But you're going to get these common questions on almost all the labs, and these are really good. So this is basically me asking for feedback. Like, what's another experiment we could do for Module 1? Because again, remember, goldfish, respiration, it doesn't matter. I just want to give students practice testing a hypothesis, which includes graphing, right? So if you could think of another experiment, let me know. This one, how can this particular lab be improved? Not the experiment, but like the lab worksheet, the way it's laid out, any of that stuff. And then, of course, if you have any other extra credit for ideas, then let me know. I think we did it. Man, that was rough. I'm sorry it was so long. The first one's always the longest. So that hopefully following this, they won't be so long. The next word for attendance will be fish. Let me quickly look at my thing here to see where we're at. First lab, showed you how to find it, showed you how to make copies. I talked about the objectives, right? The fish thing is not important. It's just the idea of being able to understand this relationship between a hypothesis and a prediction. I'm not going to be using a calculator for your math. Again, just look at your numbers. Do they make sense? The instructions on how to graph are there, but I'm here if you need me. Don't forget to add a screenshot. Don't forget to save it as a PDF. Almost done. This one's going to be really quick. Again, your quizzes, you can take them as many times as you want. They are open book. They're not timed. So there's no reason you shouldn't get the full 20 points. Just keep taking it until you get 20 points. And then you can keep taking it because your highest grade is the one that's recorded. So just really quickly before we end this, let me show you where to find the quizzes. This is very simple. Module 1 quiz. There it is. Of course, yours will look a little bit different, but that's where you take it. Whew. So I think I'm done. And I know I went through that very quickly, but does anybody have any questions? And if it's a good enough question, I might even offer you a little bit or give you more extra credit because I've been doing this for so long. Sometimes I don't know what you don't know, right? So something might seem common sense to me, but for you, you might have been like, what was he saying? So is there anything you need me to repeat or any questions? All right, then. So I guess then I might as well just do one more word for attendance because why not? So the last word for attendance is going to be based on Chastity's picture here, and it will be, are we meeting online? Oh, so I don't teach environmental chemistry, so I can't answer that question for you. I'm sorry. But that's a good thing, a good time to remind you. That has nothing to do with my course, but make sure you are in good communication with your professors. So that is a good question. So ask whoever teaches environmental chemistry, you should ask them if you're meeting online. Any other questions? All right, let's see. Ironic. So Chastity, the final attendance word, and I don't normally do this. Usually if I say it, I won't repeat it, but this is the first time. So the final word for attendance is actually based on your picture, and it is porch. So porch is the final word for attendance. Any other questions? Make sure I didn't forget anything. Looks like I have everything. All right. If there are no other questions, before I hang up, again, I want to remind you, I really rushed through that because we had so much to cover. So if you want to meet me one-on-one and talk about something specifically, something smaller, and talk about it in greater depth, shoot me an email, let me know. I'll probably give you a little bit of extra credit just for meeting me and talking to me about it, and probably give you a little bit more extra credit if you let me record it. So if there's nothing else, I'm going to let you go. Yeah, I hope you guys have a great week and a great semester. And please let me help you if you need it. I am here for you. So that's it. You guys have a great week.